Hello and most welcome to Heidegger 1778. We will today continue where we left off in 17. Let's see here what the term was. 1775. So it's been merely 3 in between. Tasting the little scroll, a sensory analysis of divine interaction in Revelation 10:8-10, authored by Meredith J.C. Warren. Last time we were talking about bringing in the soul, the body, by, amongst other things, indication from Revelation coming by means of ingestion of scrolls, making them part of your own body, something that at first gives a sweet sensation that in the stomach turns to bitter. This bitterness is knowledge and understanding. I would take it. This is how I understood it. There was extensive references to things of the body, proprioception, hearing, olfactory, tasting. We had a very nice picture of a Jewish child licking a sweetened Torah. The participation of the body means that the soul is in on it. This is why we have liturgy and why it's so utterly important with the apostolic succession of liturgy all the way back to Jesus Christ himself. When you have the movement and the word, then you have it all. But only the word will simply not do. It is simply not enough. And we ended how John receives commission to prophesy again against many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. Commentators of this short episode have generally read the consumption of the scroll symbolically and metaphorically, while recognizing the importance of the event in the context of the vision narrative. This much is clear from the text. John receives the scroll from angelic bound. from angelic being, one whose presence crosses earthly and heavenly boundaries, and as such represents a bridge by which God to mortal communication can take place directly. However, illuminating previous scholarship has been in terms of symbolism of the book vis-à-vis the role of the prophet and the content of John's prophecy, re-examining Revelation 10 through the lens of hierophagy explains how and why the consumption of something heavenly might express such an idea. This approach illuminates certain features that make clear how Revelation uses this trope to its own ends. I have defined hierophagy as a type of performative eating in which a being from a more elevated cosmic category feeds otherworldly food to a being of a lower category. The act of eating associates the eater with the other realm. In John's case, the heavenly realm. Hierophagy brings about certain changes in the eater, especially and most prominently for revelation, the direct transmission of divine knowledge to the eater. Otherworldly food. The significance of hierophagy hinges on the porous but present boundary between worlds in the cultural expectation of ancient Mediterranean cultures. A culturally understood division between human and divine food can be observed in the ways in which human beings prepared for contact with the divine. In fasting, for example, humans separate themselves from ordinary life, creating space for the divine realm to punctuate the earthly realm. Hierophagy, however, involves eating food from heaven, consuming heavenly food yields different results than abstaining from human food. And in the literary context, the eating of food from a different realm is depicted as dangerous, but also efficacious in permeating the boundary between worlds. Consuming the foods of a different realm breaches the boundaries between worlds, and in doing so creates anxiety. This anxiety is evident, for example, when angels disguised as mortals are faced with the prospect of eating human food. In Testament of Abraham, the angel Michael visits Abraham to give him the news of his impending death. As a thoughtful host, Abraham presents the angel with a table of food for two to share. Upon which Michael returns to heaven to ask God for advice. Michael argues, Lord, all the heavenly spirits are incorporeal, and they neither drink nor eat. And he has set a table with an abundance of good things that are earthly and corruptible. Michael is incapable or unwilling to eat the same food as Abraham. It is corruptible, just as Abraham is susceptible to the death that Michael is about to pronounce upon him. This division between heavenly and mortal creatures seems to be articulated in what each category of beings consumes. This division between heavenly and earthly realms helps to explain the role of the ingested scroll in Revelation 10. In consuming the scroll, John, a mere mortal, is partaking of heavenly food, and in doing so crosses the boundary between heaven and earth. There are two other literary texts that make use of the trope of hierophagy that illuminate the significance of hierophagy for understanding the ramifications of the scroll's ingestion in Revelation. Why Ezekiel is in direct literary relationship with Revelation and can in that way demonstrate the implications of the alterations that Revelation has made to Ezekiel's pattern of ingestion. For Ezra, instead, shares a cultural understanding of the implications of ingesting heavenly food and therefore illustrates the pervasive character of this motif. The first example is found in Ezekiel. There's no doubt that Ezekiel 2.8 and 3.4 is reflected in Revelation 10:8 to 10. Most, if not all, scholars who have written on the scroll in Revelation 10 have made the connection between the two scenes of scroll ingestion. The passage in Ezekiel has striking similarities with our passage in Revelation. At the start of a vision, Ezekiel hears a voice that tells him, "Open your mouth, and I eat what I give you. And when I look, looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and lo, a written scroll was in it, and he spread it before me, and it had writing and on the front and on the back, and there were written on it words of lamentation, mourning, and woe. And he said to me, Son of man, eat what is offered to you. Eat this scroll and go on. Speak to the house of Israel. So I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat. And he said to me, Son of man, eat this scroll that I give you, and fill your stomach with it. Then I ate it, and it was in my mouth as sweet as honey. And he said to me, Son of man, go, get you to the house of Israel, and speak with my words to them. Several commonalities between Ezekiel and Revelation are immediately visible. Most obvious is the fact that both figures consume scrolls handed down from heaven. Ezekiel also receives a prophetic commission to go and speak with my words to the house of Israel, which is echoed by John having to prophesy again in Revelation 10:11. In the case of Ezekiel, it is clear that the hierophagic pattern of ingestion is followed. A heavenly item is given to a special mortal to consume. By consuming the scroll, the eater gains new abilities and new knowledge. However, although Ezekiel is clearly reflected in structure and theme in Revelation's scroll event, it is not the only relevant hierophagic parallel for interpreting Revelation 10:8 to 10. For Ezra, an apocalypse of Revelations era offers a second comparator that also uses the hieroglyphic motif. Towards the end of the book, after Ezra has received 6 revelations from God in both auditory and visual forms, he experiences one final revelation through taste. In his previous revelatory episodes, Ezra has had difficulty comprehending what he has been told or shown, and needs interpretation through his angelic mediator. In this final example, however, Ezra receives the revelation directly from God through tasting the heavenly food, is granted understanding, since he has at least literary internalized God's message. A voice called me, saying, Ezra, open your mouth and drink what I give you to drink. Then I opened my mouth, and behold, a full cup was offered to me. It was full with something like water, but its color was like fire. And I took it and drank. And when I had drunk it, my heart poured forth understanding, and wisdom increased in my breast. For my spirit retained its memory, and my mouth was opened and was no longer closed. After drinking the fiery liquid, Ezra is able to dictate to his 5 scribes the contents of 94 books, 24 being the Jewish scripture in some formation, and the rest to be kept for only the wise to read. Ezra's cup has enabled him to fully access the divine realm. Like John, he is now able to transmit the divine content of that revelation, in Ezra's case, as books. This second example highlights some core elements and effects of hierophagy through an analysis of its differences with Revelation and Ezekiel. Internalizing the cup's fiery liquid affects similar consequences to John's and Ezekiel's scroll. The core event of hierophagy is clearly visible when this text is added as a comparator. On the basis of these texts, we can discern a pattern that helps in understanding Revelation's scroll scene. By consuming the scroll, John gains new abilities to prophesy again, and new knowledge, the contents of that prophecy. The core event of the hierophagic eating in Revelation can be outlined as follows. 1. A heavenly being offers. 2. Something heavenly. 3. For a mortal. 4. To eat. 5. Which brings about the internalization of divine revelation, which is later made accessible to non-eaters in different form. Hierophagy in Revelation 10:8 to 10. Revelation both participates in and innovates on the core template of hierophagic eating. John's consumption of the scroll not only builds upon a similar scroll event in Ezekiel, but also participates in the wider literary milieu that includes texts like For Ezra, where the trope is used to express the same kind of meaning. For this reason, the full ramifications of this type of eating emerge when this passage is examined in the context of the wider ancient Mediterranean. This kind of examination requires asking why eating is used in this way. What does taste accomplish that vision cannot? For the answer, I now turn to an analysis of the sense of taste. Revelation makes use of earlier and contemporary narrative events of heavenly ingestion, but at the same time, it transforms them in describing the scroll in Revelation 10 as both sweet and bitter. A sensory approach therefore illuminates how the scroll event functions. Other scholars have understood the scroll and its flavors simply as metaphors pointing to the tone of revelation John reveals. Or of the seer's personal experience performing the responsibilities of prophecy. But I propose that the flavors evoke the efficacy of his message. There are two components of this analysis. First is the fact that the intimacy of the sense of taste has ramifications for creating bonds between those who share tastes with the divine realm. Second, is the cultural expectations around sweet and bitter foods. The intersection of ingestion and taste has implications for how the sense of taste signifies and affects community formation. Sharing tastes with other eaters creates a bond between them. The important role of communal tasting and ingestion in community formation in ancient communities is well established. Dennis Smith goes so far as to declare that the idea that sharing a meal together creates a sense of social bonding appears to be a universal symbol. Meals were shared among members of a group that was already established. For example, a family or a guild, but it could also create new associations among co-eaters. Ancient writers, like modern scholars, were conscious of how meals establish and reinforce community. Plutarch considers the common meal a place where friendship is forged. A guest comes to share not only not only meat, wine and dessert, but conversation, fun, and the amiability that leads to friendship. Sharing a meal forges relationships among diners. Paul likewise recognizes this quality of sharing food as he explains to the Corinthians, because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, for we all partake of the one bread. Paul also believes that a bond can be created not only between people, but also between divine forces and those who share ritually marked food. He famously warns the Corinthians that they might find themselves partners with demons if they share in food offered to Roman gods. In ingesting food, the eater brings into him or herself the qualities imbued in the food, including the social or ontological stratification implied in the meal, the culturally loaded symbolism of the food itself, and the memory of previous meals consumed in similar or different ways. In other words, even though the angel in Revelation does not share John's scroll meal, the fact that John consumes the heavenly item means that some aspect of the heavenly realm is made internal to John. He thereby associates himself with that divine community of eaters, even when they do not share that specific meal. The special status granted to the eater does not make him or her a deity, but it does grant special access to the divine realm, access which is out of reach for ordinary mortals. And here we put a perfect stop. 1778. We have 1230, and it's 30th of August. We go to, for some quotes here, we can go to the chapter Otherworldly Food on page 109. From there on, Meredith Warren brings out the distinction, although porous, between heavenly food or foods of the divine and that of mortal And there is a pointer here at the end. In fasting, for example, humans separates themselves from ordinary life, creating space for the divine realm to punctuate the earthly poetry. And then there is a notion or mentioning that hierophagy could be very rewarding, but also dangerous. But in front of all, efficacious in permeating the boundary between worlds. By eating, you transgress the boundaries. You reach out to something heavenly, divine, higher. In my take, this is pointing to the higher, the possibility of something higher. And the wonderful quote, Ezekiel, at the very bottom of the same page. Open your mouth and eat what I give you. And when I looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and lo, a written scroll was in it, and he spread it before me, and it had writing on the front and on the back, and there were written on it words of lamentation and mourning. And he said to me, Son of man, eat what is offered to you. Eat this scroll. And by doing that, he enters also into the divine, the sharp distinction that is absolute in the ordinary life can be transgressed by doing physical things. So it looks we are locked into the inner, to use a Wittgensteinian phrase, into our private language, but we can reach out to the heavenly by the act, by the senses, by our bodies. And there is another quote further down from Ezra, where there is a voice calling out, Ezra, open your mouth and drink what I give you to drink. And then I opened my mouth, and behold, a full cup was offered to me. It was full of something like water, but its color was like fire. And I took it and drank. And when I had drunk it, my heart poured forth understanding, and wisdom increased in my breast, for my spirit retained its memory, and my mouth was opened and was no longer closed. After drinking the fire liquid, Ezra can dictate to his 5 scribes the contents of 94 books, 24 being the Jewish scripture in some formation, and the rest to be kept for only the wise to read. Ezra's cup has enabled him fully to access the divine realm. Like John is not able to transmit the divine content of that revelation. By no longer being in the inner, he can think, something that has been termed in modern time memory, and that we lack. But this is not memory, this is spirituality. To use the debased form of memory to these things is to put it on a very low, blasphemous level. It is actually incredibly important. When you are divine, nothing is put away, or as in modern parlance, forgotten. This is thinking. Further down on the next page, 112. This kind of examination requires, it's about 5, 6 down the second paragraph, requires asking why eating is used in this way. It is something that is done. What does taste accomplish that vision cannot? The taste is incredible importance, such is smell. And read further down, we have a bunch of authors who understood the scroll and its flavor simply as metaphors. So they debased this whole important part of revelation, where the meaning comes from, thereby making revelation meaningless and effectless, possibly for a certain purpose. This is what Ian McGilchrist is, reading the language of its contents, making it into empty concepts. Metaphor for something else does mean that it has no meaning at all, and you just make something up by happenstance. No, doing and existing can only be in the world. And this is also something that we do in between us, as we see further down on the same page. The important rule of communal tasting and ingestion in community formation in ancient communities is well established. The idea that sharing a meal together creates a sense of social bonding appears to be a universal symbol. And further down on that page we have sharing a meal forges relationships among diners. Paul likewise recognizes this quality of sharing food, as he explains to the Corinthians, because there is one bread, we who are many are one body, and for we all partake in the one bread. For something to have the same meaning, it must also be shared by others. Another insight from quantum theory and cognition. If it's not a shared activity, it doesn't have the same meaning. In the modern era, religion was drastically cut by the loins and desiccated. Meaning was taken away, and it was said you can have a private language meaning of revelation, metaphors, something similar, or you can have it within yourself. We now know that that means that everyone make up their own thing. And as we also know from the scarab in the box, the person himself or herself will not understand what he or she is referring to. It will be absolutely empty. So sharedness together with the concept, the word pronounced clear and loud together with the liturgy makes it have meaning, otherwise not. The bread is not unimportant, and to partaking in it in a special manner gives it its flesh. Please, Kalle Lundahl, my dear associate, coming.
Thank you. Let me reread the key passage of this study. It is this one. The angel says, "Take it and eat. It will be bitter to the stomach, but sweet as honey in your mouth." And let me compare them to this passage in Heidegger. On the next page. So, Heidegger hears a voice that tells him, "Open your mouth and eat what I give you." And when I looked, behold, a hand was stretched out to me, and lo, a written scroll was in it, and he spread it before me, and it had writing on the front and on the back, and there were written on it words of lamentation and mourning and woe. And he said to me, "Son of man, eat what is offered to you, and eat the scroll, and go speak to the house of Israel." I opened my mouth, and he gave me the scroll to eat, and he said to me, "Son of man, eat the scroll that I gave to you, and fill your stomach with it." Then I ate it. It was my mouth as sweet as honey. But there is a difference to the passage between Revelation and Ezekiel. MEREDITH, Professor Warren does not comment on this difference. The difference is that, so when we read here, there were written on it words of lamentation and mourning and woe. These are metaphorically bitter. This is a metaphoric bitter taste. Word lamentation, mourning and woe. That is, this is a bitter taste, but inscribed in words.
I see. Okay.
And because it doesn't explicitly speak about the bitter taste, as you see, it only mentions that in his mouth it was sweet as honey. While when John in Revelation eats, it is sweet as honey in the mouth, but in the stomach it is bitter. So it's, we could say it's reversed. No, it's not completely reversed, but it's different. So the words written on the scroll are bitter, metaphorically speaking bitter, because they are words of lamentation, mourning, and woe. And it becomes sweet. So we could say in Ezekiel thanks to Hezekiah's mouth, the prophet's mouth has the power to transform God's bitter words into sweet prophecies.
Definitely, it's in the process of ingestion and digestion. It is transmogrified.
So the message can still be bitter, but Hezekiah has to say it sweetly. I think is a point.
Makes
Could
sense.
be, could be. This subtle difference is interesting, and when Hans, I agree with you. Your comment on this phrase. Its flavors are simply metaphors, according to this Folas, Aune,
It's this very
Holberta.
modern tendency of calling everything in the Bible and in other texts, of course. It's not only the Bible, but it becomes metaphors, and you have this very, very narrow understanding of something that.
But we could say perhaps in Ezekiel, the literal and metaphoric are tangled because the words are bitter.
I can imagine these authors' words a way of metaphor. It's a metaphor that doesn't point to anything. It's this modern way of just reading the concept of its meaning. But metaphor can also be powerful.
So it's not even possible to say if Ezekiel's message will be sweet or bitter. It's bitter because sweetness and bitterness are tangled, intermixed.
Yeah, I would say, yeah. Sounds good to me.
And it could be as contrary to what these scholars say, Ezekiel eats it literally, the scroll. For it's hard to digest this idea.
Oh, yeah. It makes sense. Yeah, it's good. It's good. But what often happens with these authors, they are very, very distant to the text they want to investigate. They do it for hand, and so to speak, and then you get this very, very distant way of everything to look at. I think it's real. The revelation is real. It has a real message. It's not something you can sort of negotiate away.
Or to use a metaphor from quantum physics. So you have first a superposition where the message enters. The message is both sweet and bitter, but then it's up to Ezekiel to decide at the moment if it's sweet or bitter, because it's a superposition.
Oh yeah.
And so perhaps God gives him this possibility to depend on the context, as Wittgenstein had in previous figure. There are no general laws. So God doesn't give a general law to Ezekiel. You have to do this. You have to be bitter or sweet, but it gives actually the double possibility.
Yeah. When you actually do it, it lies idle until it's moved, until you do something. Very good. Yeah, definitely. Hooray for that. I can't hear anything, Kalle. Are you still with us? I think dear Kalle has some problems with the connection. Well, maybe this is a good point to put a point to this one, so to speak. I say thank you very much. Have a very pleasant day, afternoon, or night, or wherever you are. Until next, do take care. Bye bye for now.